I'm a maladapted social personality who should be nowhere near a camera. When do I start?
Scientologists, doomsday preppers, white supremacists. There's nobody who is as good at getting people to self-incriminate on camera as the documentary filmmaker Louis Theroux. And he is why I am here in London, as the flag says, because there is a small chance, and I'm betting, that maybe I can get him to self-incriminate. Just a little bit. All set?
Ready.
Cool. Lovely to meet you.
You too, Mark.
Can I just get you to just go back to pre-career time? What kind of kid were you? Like if I was to meet Louis aged maybe 13, what kind of kid would I be talking to?
13, I was a pixie-ish little boy with a surprisingly small nose.
I mean, what happened?
I know, big time. If you look at old photos, there's a slight look of, oh, this was what you looked like before the accident. I actually was a bubbly little vivacious kid who was probably able to hide the fact that he was deep down quite anxious a lot of the time.
Yeah, right. When you say anxious, what were the sort of the anxious pressure points for that kid?
Everything, really. And actually, I'd been anxious from the age of, for as long as I can remember, from the age of sort of 4 onwards.
The reason I ask about you as a 13-year-old, because I'm fascinated to know whether you were the sort of kid that other kids went to talk to. Because you do have that sort of face where people just want to be able to tell you things.
I think what I had was an ability to navigate different cliques, and I was a floater. If that, I don't know, does that sound like a...
Definitely sound like a turd.
Okay, I was a different kind of floater than that.
No, we're going to keep the first version of that. I love that you're giving me alternate versions in the hope that I'll edit it, but it's not happening.
I was a great big brown floater, floating between different social groups, and I think... Okay, this is you're mean because you've got me psychoanalyzing myself, and that's a dangerous spot to be in. I never quite belonged that squarely, that completely in any social group, but was comfortable in any of them. So I think that part of it, there's a little bit of an analogy with what I do now, where I get along with people, get to know them, but maybe in a slightly detached way.
Did I ever get lonely?
I think there were times, let me first of all say my parents are wonderful people, and I'm very grateful for everything that they did for me.
Wow, they're about to get slammed in the next sentence. I can feel that coming.
And in addition to that, I wouldn't recommend the schooling that they chose for me in certain respects. So privately educated me in all boys schools. I've compared it. One of the things I've said is that when I was at San Quentin, I felt like the prison in America where I did a film. I recognized it. It was like a boys' boarding school, really, in many respects. And I think that feeling of being without female companionship of any kind, of being in this sort of slightly Darwinian free-for-all, it can be a bit lonely.
Welcome back to TV Nation. We're standing here on the fabled Madison Avenue with our correspondent Louis Theroux.
Your first move into television was on a TV show called TV Nation, which was run by Michael Moore.
Michael Moore, yeah. And who better for an image makeover, I was thinking, than the Ku Klux Klan?
Can you tell me about the job interview where you had to speak to Michael Moore for the first time?
A friend of mine called Chris Kelly said, look, I think you'd be good on this, and go along, and there's a few things you need to know about Michael before you go along.
Hi, I'm Michael Moore.
It's important that you should have seen some of Michael's work. And I'm like, well, I've seen his segments and stuff and this and that. And he said, and also Roger and Me.
See this movie. Thousands have. You'll enjoy it.
I was like, well, I haven't seen that. He goes, well, it's important you should have seen it. And
Hello?
It's your favorite film. And I was like, okay. Noted. And I'm sure I can work with that kind of thing. So then when the call came in, Chris said, Michael's ready to see you. Come along for an interview. And I hadn't seen Roger and Me.
I know where this is going.
So I went along, and then there came a time where he said, did you see the TV Nation pilot? I was like, yeah, I saw the pilot. It was great, Michael, and big fan of your work in every respect. There's no bigger fan than I am, kind of thing. And he said, what about Roger and Me? Where did you see that? And then my heart sinks, so I go like, yes, I saw it. And with probably a glazed expression said, it's my favorite film.
And you got the job!
And I got the job!
Will the skinhead in the crowd please leave immediately? How about Elijah? Could be handy for cross burnings.
No, I don't. That's not cool. Can't use a big lighter for a crossfire.
No?
No, you had to use a torch or something.
You invented Louis! Down! 8! Down! 9!
In all your interviews and all your different documentaries, have you ever got Stockholm Syndrome? Where you're basically spending time with somebody and you know rationally their views on something are abhorrent, but you just find yourself liking them so much that it all starts to seem a bit reasonable.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say, is that actually that's part of the job. And in a weird way, it would be more surprising when I didn't get a degree of Stockholm Syndrome. In fact, it's in the DNA of what I do that I form more than the usual journalistic relationship with the people that I spend time with. God hates fags here.
And God hates you. Just don't think of fags as just those guys who are taking it up the tailpipe. Think of it as people who are involved in some perverted sex act, and I'm talking about anything other than one man, one woman in their marriage bed.
I mean, the Westboro Baptist Church,
Perfect example.
famous for being fiercely, ferociously offensive and homophobic. And then when you're with them, a lot of the time...
Shame to be an American where the fags can freely roam.
the messages start to seem not exactly normal, but you can't be shocked if you're there for sort of 2 or 3 weeks.
So what else you got?
There's a point when numbness kicks in.
One of the recurring, I think, issues that comes up with your work is like, at what point are you humanising people, and at what point are you just amplifying hate speech in some cases? So how do you navigate those moments? How do you decide, okay, we're just handing a megaphone to a lunatic here?
Well, I think it's to do with the degree of power that the person that you're talking to has and the level of critical engagement that you bring to the encounter. So with something like the Westboro Baptist Church, I challenge the views. Can I tell you what I see? I see someone who's having their cake and eating it.
The difference is, I know.
One of the things that made me feel okay about documenting them and giving airtime to their views was that it would be self-evident, especially if presented in the right way, that the views were totally idiotic. So I'm going to hell.
Yes, Louis, you are. You're going to hell.
That isn't to say that 1 out of a million might see it and think, hey, that makes perfect sense, but you can't really let your program-making decisions be guided by the fact that there's, you know, semi-psychotic people out there.
Who pushes your buttons?
I found the Scientologists were quite good at pushing my buttons, and in a way, I sort of think, like, if there is anything in Scientology, Exhibit A would be how good they are at pushing people's buttons. When the Scientologists engaged with me and would get in your face and say, like, you're lying, you're wrong, we're calling the police.
You now need to leave.
Do you have a brain?
Trespassing.
Can you read?
And I don't want him filming me, so tell him to stop.
Well, you're filming us.
Tell him to stop.
Well, you tell him to stop.
Tell him to stop.
You tell him to stop and I'll tell him to stop.
You feel so wronged by this sort of torrent of verbal attack. There were moments when I thought I was going to start losing my temper, which is quite an uncharacteristic feeling for me in my work mode. My private life's different. Pushing buttons in my private life, underslept, children, not eating their vegetables, throwing food on the floor.
And now the Church of Scientology knows how to get
now
to you.
They know. All the Scientologists needed to do was turn up and say, I'm not going to eat my broccoli, and then throw it on the floor.
One of the films that I am actually most fascinated that you've made is where you revisited one of your infamous celebrity episodes, which was about Jimmy Savile, who was a very famous children's entertainer and then later revealed to be a notorious sex offender. Why did you feel like that was a film that you needed to make?
Yeah, having made this documentary in 2000, when Louis met Jimmy, where I spent a couple of weeks more or less traveling around with him, my name had been to some extent identified with him. That program was very revealing in some ways, but did not, because I did not know, you know, the fact of his having been this sort of serial predator. We weren't able to, we did not say, you know, he's an out-and-out paedophile. I didn't know that at the time. When the full sort of sordid truth was unveiled after he died, I actually sought out all the reports. You know, after his offending was uncovered, every institution which he ever did any work at was required to do a deep dive, a deep investigation of what happened, and give full anonymity to any victims and alleged victims who wanted to speak. And it was just astonishing and upsetting and awful. It's one thing to read a newspaper article, but to read the forensic level of detail in those reports, it just hit me quite hard. I just sort of felt it was extraordinary that he'd got away with so much for so long, and wanted to delve deeper into how that had taken place. He molested, raped, abused hundreds of people. And at the same time, he was someone who, when he was alive, I called a friend, which I still struggle with.
One of the biggest things that's changed since you started making TV has been the rise of social media.
Yes.
And people love to tweet during your films, I've noticed. How do you think it changes the way it's received?
You know, I think Twitter's a really odd medium for me because so much of it is currying favour with your tribe, right? The whole idea of having opinions, which is so valued on Twitter, a lot of what I try and do is almost not have an opinion, you know, or at least undercut or challenge a certain perception, or see it in a different way, or make it more dimensional. You know, the aim really is to show how poisonous views exist, you know, what the psychology is, what is the sort of social dynamic that allows it to happen.
Louis Theroux,
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thanks very much.